How many people in this room have driven, taken the bus, taken the train, or taken a plane either across the country or maybe just across the west or even around the North Shore of Ontario or Lake Superior? Okay. One of the things that I think you're struck with, if you even do sort of the trip from Toronto around to Thunder Bay, around the North Shore, is a lot of land. A lot of land, a lot of moose, not a lot of people, not a lot of cities. I think you might be surprised to know that Canada is one of the most urban nations in the world. It's really weird when you drive it. You can't see it, you don't think it. 80% of the population of Canada live in cities. 80% of this country's population lives on 2% of the land. We are more urban than much of the US and even a considerable part of Europe. My question to you is, who speaks for cities? Who speaks where we live? Whether it's Goderich or Thunder Bay or Arnprior or Halifax. Who speaks for cities where almost 80% of us live and work and play? Now, we've been pretty progressive in Canadian local government. In 1849, Lord Baldwin created the Municipal Act. What's happened since then in terms of how cities have responded in our institutional structures? Nothing. There has been essentially no change to the system and the organization of cities since Lord Baldwin did the Municipal Act in 1849. We had a blip in the early 70s. It was called the Ministry of State for Urban Affairs. That was it. So 80% of Canada's population live in cities. No one speaks for cities. And this is not a knock against politicians. They're elected. My point is, who speaks for cities are you, myself, and everyone. That's who speaks. I would love to ask the question, how many people voted in the last election, but I think I don't want to be embarrassed, and neither do you. I'm asking, crying, pleading, each of you, whether you're in Toronto at school, going back to your hometown after graduation, you speak for cities, and picking up on what Tony said, it's about leadership. For me, leadership is like beauty. It's hard to define, but you know what, when you see it. And I think leadership in cities is changing. Leadership is not about, given this building, who scores the most goals, who sells the most cars. It's a different kind of leadership that we're looking for. We're looking for who can facilitate interactions. You know the words interdisciplinary, collaboration. It's true. You know one of the groups, however, that I find most resistant to a lot of that collaboration? My own students. They don't work with other students. They work with themselves, and we're not unique in urban and regional planning. So the world is moving to collaborative, interdisciplinary, cross-jurisdictional issues. I'm not sure that our students who become those leaders or not are. So leadership for me is, quite frankly, about change. And here's another oxymoron. I hate change. I think an awful lot of people do. Now, I know we espouse, and I trundle around, and I give lectures and say, we got to get ready for change. We got to think about the future. I do a lot of strategic planning. I taught a course in futures planning. But you know what? You know what I like? I like to go home, and in the top drawer, my socks are in the top right-hand corner. And my shirts are hung up in order. And I hate that kind of change. Yet, we live on shifting sands. How do you sort of make change a constant? How do you sort of, a phrase I think about often, how do you keep putting yourself in position? How do you keep putting yourself in position for the next one? Tony rolled out quite a few lessons this morning, and one for me that I use is, I think we are all about saying yes and putting yourself in position for the next one. Now, I'm not naive. But in terms of what you say yes to, but I try to say yes to almost every opportunity to speak, to engage, to share, to learn. because I want to put myself in position to be a player. And I mean that in the best sense. I think you got two choices in life, and it is so simple. You can wake up tomorrow morning, and you can come to school, or you can go to work. You can have coffee at Tim's or whatever your pleasure is. You can have lunch. You go home at 4 o'clock, catch Dr. Phil and Ellen. Then you can watch the news, maybe do a bit of homework, go to bed, get up Tuesday, same thing. Nothing wrong with that. It's fine. It's great. I think the other option is you can say, I'm going to do something today. I'm going to bother. And in a way, it's not more complicated than that. I'm going to bother to do something where I live or where I might want to live or in my own community, whether it's sort of the street, the apartment building, the townhouse. It doesn't matter. Those are your two choices. Leadership for me is about putting yourself in position to be part of that change. It's about creating a positive experience. It's about energy. What makes a good leader? I think a good leader is someone who challenges the process. And it's sort of funny in a way when I think of being here and just south at Ryerson. I actually think in school we drum the ability to challenge the process right out of you. I think people come into school often with a lot more creativity than when they leave. And yet I think leadership is about looking for opportunities and, as Tony said, taking risks. Like, that's what it's about. It's about knowing your own values, your strengths, your weaknesses, getting a hold on what you are about. It's about inspiring a shared vision. Enlist others. Work with others. In part of that inspiration, inspiring that shared vision, is find your own vision and passion. Like, for God's sakes, life is a long time. Do something that's fun and lively and interesting. Think about the possibilities. That's what, again, for me, putting yourself in position. Where do you want to be? Where do you want to get to? When I said earlier, planning. Like, I'm still trying to figure out what planning is. But it is so bloody simple. It's, here I am. Here's where I want to get to. And the stuff in the middle is planning. They pay me a lot of money to do this. I go all over the place and I talk about that, right? But that's all it is. But bring it home. Where am I? Where do I want to get to? And how do I get there? I am not sure necessarily I'll ever get there. And actually, I think planning, and I choose that word, is just that. Planning is a verb. It's an action word. ing. It's not about the plan, stupid. The plan is a static document. We're about leadership and change, and it's the journey. It's the process. It's the voyage of getting there. In that voyage, do it with enthusiasm and energy. I always hear students come and say, oh, God, you wouldn't believe how boring that prof was. Oh, Jesus. I want to tell you from a prof that all those student presentations are not all that exciting. They ain't bastions of holding me in the edge of my seat. How hard is it just to do something with passion and care? I sometimes say, fake it for 15 minutes. I don't care. But show me that you care about something. You got something running through your veins. That's what change and leadership is about too. Do it with passion. Inspire. Find your own visions. Tony talked about taking risks. Absolutely. I think it's the hardest thing in the world to do daring things, as he said. Risk looking foolish and doing the wrong thing. I always think of sort of sitting in a meeting, you know, and we've all done this, and we'll continue to do it. I sit in a meeting, and someone's sort of chairing it, and they ask for your opinion. And as a Canadian, I would mostly look down at my shoes. No, I don't want to be I'm not putting my hand up first. Are you kidding? And then somebody else says something, and the chair says, what a really great idea. I think that's fabulous. And I say, oh, man, that's exactly what I was going to say. But I sort of don't want to take that risk to say it because I don't want to look stupid or foolish. okay? And yet, I think we have to. You can't be perfect all the time. You take a chance. You risk being vulnerable. You put yourself out there. You put yourself in position to play. Here's something else I think we don't do. Honestly, I've been a teacher all my life. We don't trust our gut or our intuition. Right? Again, we sort of drum that out. Like it's sort of like, well, if you can't bean count it or chi-square chrome reverse, whatever, some analysis, right? It doesn't matter. I don't care what the data says. What do you think? What's your gut? What's your intuition? I mean, you know that yourselves. Half the time you look at after something and say, you know, my gut was right with that one. And I don't mean they're sort of one or the other, but how do you sort of use your gut, use your intuition? For God's sakes, be prepared to make decisions. That goes back to who speaks for cities. We are all about avoiding a decision. And I think that's a huge failing. Make one for God's sakes. I'm prepared for it to be wrong, but please, dear God, make one. That's what leadership is as well. Now, leadership isn't about making the solitary decision. It's about that collaboration, facilitation, and working together for make a decision. But you can't avoid one. My own discipline, planners get crapped on all the time for not making a decision. Well, we need another study on that. When in doubt, I think we need a royal commission, quite frankly. Damn it, make a decision. Okay? That's what this is about. Go somewhere. Go from here to there. Make baby steps. Fine. But make them progressively. I just remember a spectacular workshop I was at. One of the best workshops in all my years I've ever been at. And it's really funny. It was called Yes and. Yep, that's Y-E-S ... and. I went to this workshop, wasn't really sure, nothing else was looking that really good on the program. So I walked in, and I learned something, I had it reiterated in a way to me what I do in class all the time. The opposite of yes and is yes but. Now as a teacher, you in your own groups, professionally, wherever, right? You know how many times you're in a group and someone says, well, what do you think? Well, I think that, it would really be a good idea to get the bike lanes off Jarvis and put them on Sherburne, or vice versa. And someone will say, yes, that's a good idea, but I think. The yes, but has just totally sort of dissed whatever that person thinks. Okay? You want to disempower someone, say, yes, good idea, but. Yes, and is a fundamentally different kind of building capacity. Yes, I think you have a good point. And what I'd like to, that's different. That's building value. That's adding to the cup being half full. So take those risks. Look vulnerable. Don't be afraid to answer. Learn how to communicate. Enable others to act. Okay? I think you get power by giving it away. We're not about sort of owning power. We're about giving it away. We're about sharing it. We're about building capacity. All of my international work, right? It's about building capacity. The idea of a consultant is not to leave thinking, oh, they're going to hire me to come back and I'm going to get the big contract. The idea of a consultant is to build enough capacity so you don't come back. So you've left the strength and the ability and the capacity there, and they don't need you. That's true community building and development and empowerment and building capacity. So we enable others to act. We model the way. We encourage the heart. I use a phrase called practicing the art of acknowledgement. You know, little stuff like thank you seems to, you don't hear thank you on the subways anymore. Like mostly it's like, get the hell out of my way. Get that sick passenger off the train and get this thing moving. Okay? Practicing the art of acknowledgement, just like little stuff. People seem to be so surprised by that kind of stuff. And it matters. So you lead from within. You lead by example. You know yourself. You have vision and passion. You take risks. You communicate effectively. One of the biggest risks for me, and I was scared, I would rather speak to 500 or 1,000 people any day. I ran for city council quite some years ago, and I remember I had a campaign office, and I was writing literature, and I'd make phone calls, and my campaign team said, Mitch, you actually got to go knock on doors. I said, oh God, please, no, can't I just you actually got to go knock on doors. Now, maybe some of you have done this for someone else, but when you're the candidate, and I remember standing at the top of a street thinking, I got to go door to door all the way down here, I was scared silly, because you got 30 seconds to expose yourself completely to someone and say, what are you about? Like it's me. It really is like, by me. Here's what I'm about. Okay? And it was incredibly, I found challenging. I was scared. By the end of the campaign, I actually got pretty good at it. But that's sort of, for me, what a risk was. How does that sort of link to cities? Ain't nobody else going to be leaders for where we live for us. We are partners in all of our own communities. We have a responsibility. You know, what's her name up the street? You know, good old Jane? Good old Jane that lived on Albany Avenue, last name Jacobs. Jane Jacobs talks about cities being fragile. They are. They're not resilient, and they can take so much. But the strength of cities is in the people who are there. And what's good for cities are good for countries. You got to bother. You got to bother to put out the effort and to put yourself in position, as I said, and play. That's who we're looking for. I believe you can make a difference. I believe you put yourself out there and you build capacity. And what I would leave you with is sort of one line that I like a lot. For me, it says it all. Sort of read it. There's a parade going on out there. There are leaders, there are followers, and there are observers. Some people do not even know it's going on. That parade is your life. What role do you want to play? Thank you.